Hey guys, we are going to dive into the story of Josiah today, and this is such a good one. I love Kings and Chronicles. Those are my favorite Old Testament books, so I'm sure you've realized that because when we're on them, my videos are like ridiculously long, so I apologize, but I just love them so much, and I love to share the things that I see in them, and I can't leave anything out. So you guys just get the whole deal. Lucky you, right? So today's gonna be a bit longer because we're in 2 Kings 22 and 23, and then we're also in, I put it on a card here, 2 Chronicles 34 and 35. So both of them are the story of Josiah, okay? Jumping in here to chapter 22 of Josiah's story. So let me set the stage. Josiah is 8 years old when he comes into reign. He loves the Lord, and he does it the best he knows how to do, leading them with integrity and living how he feels the Lord, how he's been taught the Lord wants you to live. And so that's been his desire. But back then, like, they didn't have, at this time in Jerusalem's history, they didn't have any of the actual writings. So it was kind of like telephone where like this person told this person told this person. So it was like Josiah's best guess. And at 16 years old, it says, he decided to start rebuilding the temple. He wanted to rebuild the temple because he loved the Lord so much. And as they were uncovering things, they found the law of Moses. And it said that when they found the book of the law from Moses, that Josiah hears this and his soul is moved. And he realizes how far they have all gotten from the actual truth, that like all this stuff has become normalized, that he thought he was doing it how God wanted him to do. And then once it was read to him, he realized this is not even close. Like, this is not even close. And he tore his clothes and he wept, and he was so heartbroken from this. And I love this. What stuck out to me in that part of the story was how in that's 3 through 14, verses 3 through 14. And how his heart broke for the things that broke God's heart. And that's what our heart should look like. Like, things that make God's heart break should break our heart. When we have loved ones not following after God, we shouldn't be just like, hopefully they come around. No, it should break our heart, guys. It should break our heart. Do you realize that's an eternity apart from your loved ones? It should break our heart. Or to the orphans, or to the single moms, or to the poor, right? The homeless people who are drug addicted. That should break our hearts. It breaks our Lord's heart. It makes him cry. It makes him weep. We should be weeping for those things too. So having your heart aligned with God is kind of what pulled out of the pages for me there. And then verses in chapter 23, verses 4 through 20 go into detail on how far Israel had gotten, like of just having cult prostitutes inside God's house, these sun and moon and constellation of hosts of heaven, these altars they built for them, right? People who worship, we saw that today, right? Astronomers who kind of go, it's actually called something, I can't remember what, but it's like people get really into the stars and the constellations and the moon phases and stuff. And this is a problem. They had altars for those. Baal was in there. All these different gods. We're still in space, in the spaces, but Josiah didn't realize those were wrong. He wasn't taught that those specifically were wrong. And they read this book, and he rips his clothes and he's like, oh my gosh, we are so far from what God wanted us to be. And he just freaks out and kind of just goes on this rampage of like, cleaning house. We're going to clean this up. And so it says the king stood at the pillars and made a covenant before the Lord. This is the beginning of chapter 23. Verse 3, to walk after the Lord and to keep his commandments and his testimonies and his statutes with all of his heart and all of his soul, guys, to perform these words of his covenant that are written in this book. And all the people joined in the covenant. And so I saw 4 things here as I was in chapter 23, verse 3. It really stood out to me that there was this like walk after the Lord, this keep his testimonies, this keep his commandments, this keep his statutes. And it was all with his whole heart and his whole soul to perform this covenant that's written. And I love that. And those stood out to me. So I was like, I wonder what they would give as a definition of these things. So I looked them up to share with you guys because I thought it just stood out to me. So I wanted to share it with you guys. And it was walk. So when you walk after the Lord, it's following the Lord in devotion, obedience, and a lifestyle. That is what it means to walk with the Lord. So religion can be Christianity. We believe God created the earth. But being a Christian and walking with the Lord looks like a lifestyle of obedience and devotion and following him. It's aligning with his character, his will, and his direction. Okay, and then the other one, he said, is keep his commandments, which are the 10 commandments. They're the direct moral instructions. That's what those were. And then it says his testimonies, which the testimonies were the declarations, the reminders of what God has done. So remember Moses, it said, write these out, all these things that I've done, from pulling you out of Egypt, the plague, and pulling you out of Egypt and parting the sea. And then you went into the desert. Remember, and he told him to write all these things down to teach it to your children. That's what these were, all the testimonies. And we should do the same, right? We should write out testimonies, our own testimony, whether it was your salvation story or other stories along the way that God's given you to show he's real, he's moving, he's alive and active today. Write those testimonies down to share with your grandkids and your children and all of that. But he says he kept all of those and God's statutes. And those were the rituals that set God's people apart. So festivals, dietary restriction, temple rituals, all those things is all the things he followed. So he crossed the T's, dot the I's, followed this to a T, and then he removed all the stuff from the temple. And one of the things that I thought was interesting in this setup is I was like, man, what in our world has been normalized? Just like Josiah, he didn't realize all this was a problem. What has been normalized? And the only way we will know what has been normalized that's not good is getting into this book. Because Josiah didn't know that these things were an issue until he learned about it, he read about it, he heard about it. That's how he knew to do it differently. So if you're not in this book, I will tell you right now that our world has normalized a whole lot of evil that's not in this book. They've blurred a whole lot of lines. They've painted everything gray. They just took that black and white and mixed it all together, and we're like, oh, yeah, it's just great. I love God. Yes, he created the world. End of story. But this says different. And so the beautiful thing about reading scripture, which is something that I really love, is that once you read this for yourself, no one can lie to you. No one can tell you that this is supposed to be normal or acceptable, because this is the one that's teaching you those things. And that's so important, because I grew up in a culture in my faith, when I grew up, the faith that my parents were following and that I was taught was more memorizing doctrine. And then when I got a Bible for myself and started reading it, I'm like, wait a minute, this God in here, he doesn't sound anything like, wait, these things I memorized aren't even in here. Wait a minute. The things that they were telling me, like not being perfect, I'm going to go to hell because I sinned. I'm just going to hell. That's it. No grace, just hell and brimstone, right? That was just nope, you're a bad person. You're gone. You're going to hell. Just to let you know, you're going to hell. And I come into here and I'm like, wait a minute. That's not who this God is. That's not who he is. He loves me and thinks I'm valuable so much that he died for me. He's actually knowing I'm not going to do it perfect. He already expects me not to do it perfect, but he's forgiven me. He wants my heart to just repent to him and come to him and live with him, because that's the most fun I'll ever have. He's not trying to rip me from fun. He's trying to help me be free from the chains of the world. And I didn't realize any of this until I got into it myself. And so it's so important to come in here to see what the world has normalized, like Josiah. And then you find out, ooh, wow, I'm way off track. The world is just putting it in. We can blame the internet, but guys, it was happening even back then. It's not the internet. It's just nothing's new under the sun, as Ecclesiastes says. Nothing's new under the sun. The world blurs the line constantly. That's the devil's trick. If he can just blur the truth, make it a half truth, and then he can get you a little bit farther, a little bit farther, a little bit farther. But staying in the word to have that solid truth is so important. Okay, I have to keep going here because I am way too long on these first little ones. So lastly, the last thing I think there is that I really wanted to point out here in chapter 23, verse 25 here, it says, before him there was no king like him, who turned to the Lord with all of his heart and with all of his soul and with all of his might, according to the law of Moses, nor did any like him after arise like him. I love that. Isn't that beautiful? I pray this over my kids. I'm like, I want them to love the Lord with all their heart, all their soul, all their might, all of their being, to love him so much and to be intertwined with him and living that lifestyle. And what we see happens is Josiah ends up dying. And in this version, in King's version, it's kind of wait a minute. And so he just dies. Like he was honoring God and then he just dies and then they go back into slavery with Egypt. Wait, what just happened here, right? Well, in Chronicles, we're going to get a bigger zoom in on this. We're going to kind of zoom in on what was actually happening in that part of the story. But first, jumping over into Chronicles, 2 Chronicles 34 we're on right now. And in 34, we see again Josiah's zeal for the Lord, even at a young age, that he worked to rebuild the temple. And I thought, man, what a gift that God brought into his hands the books of law, right? Like before the exile, because we know that the exile is coming. I hate to break it to you guys, this is coming to the end of the Israelites. They're about to go into 400 years of exile. And it's about to happen. All the things we were reading in Isaiah, that's about to take place. But right before, Josiah reads the book of law to all the people. He called in the Benjaminites, the Ephraim, Manasseh, all of these people, Simeon, Naphtali, all these people. He brought them all. He read it before them. So God, I don't think it was by accident. I think God brought them to it, to find it, for Josiah to read this before all of them, for them to see how far they have gotten from God, which is really quite sad, right? So I love that he has this zeal for the Lord. He speaks this to all of them right before they go into exile. So then the other thing in chapter 34, verse 30, I'm going to read that to you guys when I find it here. And the king went up to the house of the Lord with all of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem and the priests of the Levites, all the people, both great and small. And he read in their hearings the book of the covenant. Our heart should be to share about God and his word and the gospel. When Josiah heard this, his heart, he ripped his clothes, his heart changed. Remember, we talked about this. He had this zeal that came up. He wiped out all this stuff from the temple. And then he gathered everybody because he needed them to hear this. He's like, you guys have got to hear this truth. And that should be our zeal. Our zeal should be for the Lord and to share about him, to share this stuff in scripture. If you don't know how to share the gospel, it's most likely like you're not in this book enough to know what to share about him. It's just sharing who God is. And this is where you find out who he is. If you were reading a history book, you wanted to learn about George Washington, he's dead. You can't learn it. You can't talk to him. But if you read books about him, you start to learn who he is, like his characters, his mannerisms, all those things. You can read tons of books on him. Same thing as God, okay? In a type, like that's kind of like equating it in the best I can. But that's what you do here. You read this Bible to learn who God is and to understand his character, his nature, how he works, what his heart is. It's all revealed here in the scripture. And so we can share the gospel so much easier if we're in this every single day, learning who he is and spending that time with him. Okay, and then chapter 35, verses 7 through 15. They all worked together, stood out to me. They all worked together to follow it all to a T. And so I looked this up because Josiah's about to do this really great thing. He's about to do a Passover. And I'm like, man, how long ago was this Passover? And I looked it up. So Josiah was 26 and he's like, we're going to host a Passover. And they all worked together to gather the supplies. And I love that. That's unity piece. You know, I love unity here. And so it was 388 years ago, about, it's like guesstimating on Google, but 388 years ago since the last Passover. Can you guys believe that? Like this Passover of this great act God did. And then he's like, I want you to have this Passover every year so you don't forget that I am your God. I'm the rescuer. I'm the one who will restore, the ones who save you. Like, remember that. And for 388 years, it was not practiced. They did not have this feast. And I'm just like, whoa, that is so long. And I think it's kind of crazy how close it is to the number 400, which they were in exile about 400 years. But anyways, going into verses 20 through 23, that it says that Pharaoh told, so now we get that bigger picture here of what happened with Josiah, how Pharaoh killed him. And we're like, why did that all of a sudden happen? Well, in this story, Pharaoh told Josiah, he says, get out of my way. My beef's not with you. It's with these other people. So get out of my way. And Josiah didn't listen. And Pharaoh said, the Lord said so to me. And I was like, does that mean Pharaoh was a follower? So I looked that one up in a bunch of commentary. And actually, Pharaoh was not a follower. It was just showing that God can use ordinary people to do his will. He can speak through unexpected sources, is what it was kind of talking about here. And then another thing that kind of pulled from me is on past obedience, like you're obedient with the Lord doesn't excuse present disobedience. So while God was speaking to Josiah, he kind of was disobedient in this and chose to still go into this battle. And I was thinking too, how this is like discerning the voice of God requires humility, guys. It requires a lot of humility, not assuming we know better. That as you start walking that faith and you're in that lifestyle with God, it's really easy to think you know best and you know better, and everybody else might just be wrong because you walk with God. And there's a humility required. We need to continually be discerning of God's voice. That if somebody comes out to us and says something, that we don't be like, no, I walk with God. I got it. No, I know he can talk to me if he has a problem. That we take all those things and ask the Lord, just simply ask him, like, is this from you? Or is this a distraction? And let it fall off. If it's a distraction, if it's from the Lord, obey it. Because we see here that Josiah didn't. And what happened is that promise God made with him after he built this temple, it says that God did not turn away his anger that he had on Israel. They were still going to be judged for all this. I mean, you saw how bad it got in God's temple. So bad. They're going to be judged. And he said, but Josiah, you have been so faithful to me. I won't do it in your lifetime and you'll die peacefully. But Josiah did not obey here. And so he went into harm's way and he got shot with an arrow and he did die. And here's something that I wanted to, and not in a peaceful way. He got shot with the arrow and then they had to like ride him in the chariot back to, I'm like, oh my gosh, that'd be so painful. Can you imagine like having and riding that horse chariot? Like, oh, that'd be horrible. And so he didn't get that promise because he chose not to obey God when Pharaoh spoke. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to share with you guys today was in verse 24 through 25. And it's just something that really stuck out to me, is it said that Jeremiah wrote laments about him, that Jerusalem and Judah all made laments. Like they loved this king. They loved Josiah, that the whole country was making laments when he died. And this is what came to mind to me. I was like, how interesting is that he was on fire for God and forced them to love God. He forced them. He declared it and forced all of them to make a new covenant, saying, I'm going to follow God and God alone. He ripped out all of their idols, all their statues. He burned them. He buried up bones from bad, evil prophets and burned them. So he didn't even let them stay buried in the ground. He burned those. Like all these things, he casted out. And that had to be really hard for the people. This was their life. This was their normalcy, and they were not getting a choice in this. It was kind of a dictatorship, but in the best way ever. That it was get rid of all of that, rip from them. And you would think that the people would actually have hated Josiah for this, right? Of like, oh my gosh, you're forcing this down my throat. I cannot stand, like, thank goodness this king's gone. Now I can finally worship Baal. I liked Baal. Or now I can finally go to fortune tellers. I liked doing that. But Josiah got rid of all of it. He held a firm line, got rid of all of it, and forced them into loving God and saying, we're going to worship God and God alone. And what happens is when he dies, they didn't rejoice over his death. They lamented. They were so sad in it. And I thought, how interesting is that he held a firm line, because we believe this line all the time, right? Especially as moms. If you're a mom, you probably know what I'm talking about here, because we believe this all the time. We're like, man, if I speak this truth, my kid's not going to like me so much. They're not going to like, I want my kid to have a good relationship with me. I want them to feel open with me and that they can tell me things, and I want them to love me and like me and have this friendship. So I'm not going to stand for complete truth. I'm going to just let it be normalized. And that's actually no good. No, it's not good, guys, because we see here Josiah stood for that good, and we want to believe that lie that they'll hate us, but actually they loved him because of it, because that was true love. It'd be different if they were leading him down a path of a false god, because that one can't actually do anything. But he brought them to the Lord, who changes the heart, who can actually save them, who can actually do things. And they loved him for it. That was probably a really hard change. And it was probably really hard on the people because they didn't have a choice in the matter. But guess what? They loved Josiah for it, because they finally had safety. They finally had a peace feeling. They finally had this joy. They finally felt connected and unified. Like, did you guys see that all that he read it to was the Benjaminites, Simeons, Ephraim's, Manasseh, all that? They're normally divided, and yet there was this unity under God that they got. They loved this king because of the truth he stood for. And so I wanted to just hit on that a little bit, because I think we can tell ourselves that lie a lot, that we often think if we stand for truth, people will hate us, or or we fear that we won't be liked. But I have noticed myself, even personally, that the more I speak truth and hold that line, the more actually people feel safer with me. They're like, Anna, she's not wishy-washy. She has a reason for every single thing she believes. It's not just because she likes that idea. Like, there's actually a lot of solid ground, because when I talk to her and try to dig deep, there's like no end to what that is, because that bottom line is God. Like, there's no end to the layers of reasoning I have for my beliefs. And that makes people feel safe around me. It makes them feel loved around me. It makes them start to think of like, man, what if I am wrong in this? And I mean, obviously, if I'm addressing it, it's because it's not biblical truth. And so I'm addressing it with them. But I have not had anybody yet, at least. I mean, people will roll their eyes like, here goes Anna. Oh my gosh, this crazy Christian. And that's fine. I really don't care, because I'm not going to change. Because we have to hold that line. But how many people have actually, it has helped, they have felt and have been released from change, from bondage, from feeling less than, finding a peace and a joy and a newness. Like, how many people it's helped is far worth it. And nobody, not a single person, has hated me for it. Nobody's hated me for it. I mean, like I said, they might get like annoyed or like roll their eyes, but no one's hated me for it. And so sometimes we get worried, like I said, especially with our kids, that we don't want to stand for complete truth, because we want them, so we want to kind of sugarcoat it instead of giving to them straight. Like, they can handle this. We can tell them truth. And they need to handle it, because they need to walk in that, and we got to teach them the way to go. And so I want to encourage you to do that hard thing. The world has normalized all kinds of evil, guys. It has normalized, I mean, guys, it's normalized choosing the gender you are. Like, God made a man and a woman. Nowhere in here he made a man and then a woman, and then the woman wanted to be a man. None of that's in here, because he doesn't make mistakes. He chose purposely for each one. He numbered the hair on your heads. He chose what genitals you have. He has chosen if you can bear children or not, if you have a womb. He's chosen all of these things. And you can't be splitting these hairs. We have normalized way too much. And we need to get back and have this zeal Josiah has for the Lord and his law. And it only can start if you get into this word. So if you have a kid that you're struggling with, that you're like, yeah, Anna, I know, I hear you. I want to do that. I don't know how to do that. I can't tell you. He can. Okay? He's going to know your exact situation. So my recommendation for you is to get in the word. Ask God, show me where to start in here, where you want to show me and direct my steps. And then get alone in prayer time saying, Lord, what do I say? How do I start this conversation? Guide me in this. Be submissive. Be humble, guys. Just ask him and he'll direct you. And it will be perfect, because God's way always is. And like I said, it could get worse before it gets better. But look at, in the end here, the people loved Josiah. So hold fast to that, guys. Get out there. Preach this, okay? Preach this. Share this with people. Love others enough to want to give them truth and solid ground. Our world is craving authenticity, and it's here. This is where it starts, because this is how we were actually created. We have all these other false masks we put on. But if you get into these roots, what is a man? What is a woman? It's all in here, guys. It's all in here. Exactly how it should be and how it was designed at the beginning. So get into this book, read it for yourself, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.